So we are recording. Hello, everyone. So before I ask the questions that we've prepared for the panelists, I'd like to start with you, Will. Could you just introduce yourself briefly, please?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Will Long. I'm head of client partnerships at Flex Legal, and I have a particular focus in that on Flex Trainee, which is a program that we have developed to make it easier for businesses and law firms to bring socially mobile talent into their teams through the SQE route. I was called to the bar donkeys years ago, and I've worked in and around the legal industry for the past 16, 17 years at Practical Law Company, LexisNexis, Axiom, where I headed up their financial services practice for a while, and Alacrity, which is a small startup, wonderful business, where I was working before I joined Flex about 6 months ago. But you didn't want my life story, so I guess I should pass on to Hannah instead.
Hi everyone. Yes, I'm Hannah, early ambitions advisor at Shakespeare Martineau. Do you know what? I've only had 2 cups of coffee, and I'm going to blame that. But we'll get there. So I've been at Shakespeare Martineau now for just over 2 years, and essentially within my role, attract, recruit, develop early talent within the business. And quite a large part of my role over the past 2 years has been getting to grips with the SQE and uncovering what that means for us, the opportunities, the challenges for us, and how we want to respond to it, and kind of getting that program in place, really. So yeah, so that's me. So Tegan.
Yeah, thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Tegan Williams. I'm a 3rd year solicitor apprentice at Severn Trent's in-house legal team. So I'm kind of preparing for the SQE coming up in the next couple of years.
Lovely, thank you so much. My first question is to you, Will. The SQE formally came into force on September the 21st, and we've already seen many law firms and legal businesses make changes to their recruitment processes as a result. Can you tell us a little bit about the key elements of the SQE that employers should be aware of, and any patterns of change you're already seeing in the market?
Sure, of course. And I guess I should start by repositioning myself slightly, because I think everyone is learning about the SQE and has been since September, Flex and myself included. And it'd be really interesting to learn from each other as part of this conversation as well. But let me tell you a little bit about what it is and how we're seeing it working at the moment. So as you said, Nisha, the SQE was launched last year, a new route to qualification, a really exciting alternative for aspiring lawyers who want to avoid the traditional, training contract bottleneck. And from the trainees' perspective, there are really 5 important criteria that need to be met. First of all, you need to pass your SQE1 exam, which is a multiple choice assessing functional legal knowledge, as the SRA frames it. The second is the SQE2 exam, which is a written and oral exam which tests more practical legal skills. You have to have an undergraduate degree, but that can be in any subject. Equivalent qualifications are also applicable, like a degree level apprenticeship. And then critically, you have to present evidence of 2 years worth of qualifying work experience. That can be any relevant legal experience, working with a maximum of 4 different employers over that 2-year period. And then finally, the 5th piece is that all of that has to be presented to the SRA for qualification. The SRA then review the documentation and do a final character and suitability assessment, as they would in a traditional qualification. So that's kind of some of the mechanics. I think what it means in practice for law firms and businesses is, first of all, there's now a way to develop junior talent that's much more cost effective and flexible. So the cost of providing courses and exams under the SQEs tends to be much lower, but also it's flexible in that you can really point your trainee at the work that needs to be done and have them add value. You don't need to think about, for example, a contentious seat, which for a lot of in-house lawyers is a wrinkle that they worry about. Secondly, trainees can study while they work, which brings a real practical focus to qualification, which I think is really important. It means that trainees are learning within the context of the real life outcomes that they're contributing to. They have a much more rounded experience in that way. And thirdly, then that means that ideally, your newly qualified lawyer emerging at the end of the process is shaped in the mold of your firm or your business and the contribution that the legal team is making, that they've been developed in. And if you think about the background of some of the eye-watering newly qualified salaries that we see out there at the moment, that should arguably therefore present much better value for money for those firms and businesses as well. So it's a really exciting development. I think in terms of what we've seen this year, I think it's fair to say at the start of this year, most employers we talked to were at best partially aware of how the SQE works or what it even stood for. And that's changing. We've seen a big increase in awareness, which I think is driven in part by the social mobility angle to all of this, because there's a lot of potential through the SQE for legal teams to bring in more socially mobile talent and ultimately then reshape their teams and the profession as a whole, which I think there's a huge amount of appetite to get behind, was fantastic. I think the fact that it's lower cost, the ability to study and work at the same time attracts people of different economic backgrounds. If diversity of talent and thought is something that law firms and businesses sincerely care about, then the SQE route to qualification is a very good way of promoting that. I think on the other hand, we've also learned that there are a few practical stumbling blocks occasionally for businesses and firms, particularly smaller firms wanting to do this. If you are doing it through that social mobility lens, there's a lot of time and effort potentially in recruiting the best talent that exists within that pool. There's also, and we'll get onto this potentially, but a bit of an admin headache around recording qualifying work experience and making sure it's approved efficiently. There's the time required for mentoring and pastoral care. Particularly busy in-house lawyers sometimes worry that they won't be able to do that responsibly. And that's really why we built our Flex trainee program. It's a really neat way to streamline those issues, and that's why we're really excited to be talking to as many people as possible about it. But I'm not here to promote that, but that's hopefully a helpful overview of what we're seeing at the moment through the SQE.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much, Will, for such an articulate answer. Does anybody have any questions for Will before I move on? Okay, if you do have, please put them in the chat function. Moving away to actually in-house, so to a law firm, Hannah, if I may come to you, Will has talked about their Flex trainee program. I understand that Shakespeare's has recently redesigned their pathways to qualification. Can you tell us a bit about this, and how are you adopting the SQE at Shakespeare's?
Yeah, so we've our starting point with the SQE was thinking about what we wanted as a business, and the key thing for us was to create choice and create flexibility, and that's for both individuals who want to qualify, but also the teams themselves. So creating that choice and flexibility. That was where we started at. So we looked at, we had some focus groups around the business to look at what was great about the current routes, what flexibility we could build into the programs. And actually where we landed is kind of a four-pronged approach to qualification. So the first one is our SQE training contracts. So from this year, we are moving across to the SQE for our training contracts. So our preference is through the SQE, but with the idea of choice, if you've already started your LPC route, you can still qualify through that pathway with us. it runs very much the same or similar to our current training contract program. The reason for that is because it was working really, really well. We've built a really good program, so actually we want to keep that there, and it's a great route for people who are coming into the profession thinking, I don't know where I want to qualify, I want to get a variety of seats. Brilliant, fantastic. What we are able to do though with that route is we're actually extending our training contract. So rather than 2 years, we're actually making it 27 months. And we are adding to the front of it a 3-month seat in operations for all trainees. And the idea behind that is that we all know that lawyers it's not enough to just know the law these days, and particularly those who are going into more business advisory roles, or more corporate, commercial, those sort of roles. It's really valuable to actually understand how a business operates. And take a step back and understand how a law firm operates. So that's why we built in a 3-month operations seat at the very beginning, and the SQE has given us that flexibility to do that with our training contract. The second route that we're looking at is we are capitalising on the apprenticeship route. So for us right now, we are focusing on the SQE graduate apprenticeship, and this is a route where we know that not everyone's great at performing at assessment centres, to put it completely bluntly. Assessment centres for training contracts, it is such a complicated, it's such a challenging process for a lot of people. And actually for a lot of people in the business, they are already working in a team that they really want to be in. They know where they want to qualify. So actually taking them from that team and putting them on a 2-year training contract, rotating around the business, it's not great for them. It's not great for the team. So we are building in the ability for teams from September this year to be able to put individuals through the SQE graduate apprenticeship, as long as they are foreseeing that there will be a newly qualified role available at the end of the apprenticeship route. So this is for people in the teams who really want to qualify in that area and have got the necessary skills and competencies to be able to do that. They spend the vast majority of that apprenticeship period of time with that team. But we are still building in a factor of rotation. So we recognise that actually rotating and getting some different experience is really valuable whatever angle you're coming at from this. So, but actually, if you are, for example, going to be qualifying into employment, you can rotate into an area of the business that will be similar, or that will kind of, when you're qualified, it will complement your qualification area at the end. So yeah, really great role for people within the business, also with apprenticeships, and I'm sure Tegan will talk about this, much better work-life balance opportunities, because you've got that work and studying built into the programs. So that's our SQE graduate apprenticeship. Our third route is the SQE self-funded route, and it isn't really a route, it's more of a just giving awareness to people in the business that they can self-fund their SQE, but being open with them about the challenges they're going to face on that route, and things they probably need to think about before they jump into that themselves. And then the final route that we have is SILEX. So we do, aside from this list of qualification route, we do qualify people through SILEX. And where people already have the LPC at the moment, SILEX offers a route for them to qualify and then cross-qualify to become solicitors at the end if they want to. So I think that's a very top-level overview of our 4 routes, if that's all right.
That's absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. I've got a couple of questions for you. One is from Liz. Are larger firms paying for the SQE 1 and 2 to attract talent? And how should small firms approach this, bearing in mind their smaller pockets?
That's really interesting, because actually, so my background before I joined Shakespeare Martineau, I was at a much smaller firm. I was at Bretherton's, which were about 200 people, Rugby, Banbury and Bicester area. So I've kind of got 2 feet in it. I've seen it from both sides. As a business, we do fund the SQE at Shakespeare Martineau. We fund the prep courses, and that's because actually we want to, when we are investing in that qualification process, we want to know that the the course that the individuals are going on are actually going to really prepare them properly, because actually it's about the end goal for us and getting that really good quality in NQ solicitor. So we do fund the SQE prep courses, but we also have just gone through a tender process. So we are requesting that they qualify through, or they do their prep courses through our provider. And actually, and I'm sure we'll get onto this later, there are some challenges and some gaps with the SQE. So we are building on additional modules to their SQE prep courses that we will fund again, that will cover those little gaps that we're worried about with the SQE. In terms of small firms, the apprenticeship route, I think, is a fantastic route, because the funding for the SQE graduate apprenticeship, that will come from your apprenticeship levy, which I'm assuming that you're paying into in any case. But regardless, I don't know whether anyone's got a better eye on this than me, but I think it's 5% at maximum you pay anyway. So even if you've used up all your apprenticeship levy, there's still 5% that you would still only have to pay 5% of the full cost. The government would fund the rest of it. So that gives you a much more cost-effective way of funding the SQE. Yeah.
Brilliant. I've got one last question. Are you validating qualifying work experience for your current paralegals who are self-funding the SQE?
Yes, we will. And we'll come on to that in a bit also, but largely we don't have a choice. And I think that's kind of the key thing is that with the SQE, we all have to remember that it's what existed before was it was a law firm's responsibility to decide on solicitor competence, but actually that's now changed, and it's the SRA who is signing off whether someone's competent. So we don't really have an option. We have to sign off QWE if they meet the criteria, but we can get ahead of it by helping to guide them through that process. And it's also about bearing in mind that whilst the SRA, and being clear with your employees that whilst the SRA might say you are competent to practice as a solicitor, you've met all of our requirements, the SRA's benchmark might be there, our benchmark might be here. So it's not necessarily just because you're qualified, just because you've met the requirements of the SRA, that doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're going to have an NQ role at the firm. So I hope that's answered the question.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. I know the questions are coming in thick and fast. Chrissy, maybe you could answer this. I don't know if you could answer this one before I go to Tegan. Can the QWE for the SQE be backdated?
Yes, so it can. So it can be retrospective. So you can have completed all 2 years of your QWE before the SQE actually came into force. And in order to do that, you would need sign off effectively, or confirmation as it's now called correctly, so we don't get confused with competence, from your employer or your employers who employed you during that process. So what you would need to do is you would need to compile effectively your log of the QWE that you did for those 2 years and obtain confirmation from those employers to confirm that you have done that. But yes, I think we're going to come on to this slightly later in the discussion. But yes, it does work retrospectively, and you can get your QWE confirmed retrospectively.
Brilliant, thank you. There are a lot more questions and I will come to them. I just do want to talk to Tegan first of all. Tegan, you're currently doing an apprenticeship in-house at Severn Trent. What made you want to do an apprenticeship instead of the traditional route? And how has the SQE enabled you to do that?
I think the big thing with the SQE was stability. I came out of sixth form and I kind of had a bit of enough of education, or full-time education anyway. I felt that I wanted to go into the working world, but I knew I wanted to be a solicitor. So I was kind of in this limbo period where I was almost done with full-time education, but I couldn't really progress and do obviously a solicitor's role without the qualifications that I needed. And the SQE offered stability, because I think I worried about doing a law degree, coming out and then not being able to get a training contract, and then you've almost wasted 3 or 4 years of your life doing a degree, and then you can't progress and you can't then move on and move on into the legal world. Whereas the SQE gave me almost this promise that this program is almost 6 years, but that will be your law degree, it will be your solicitor qualification, and Severn Trent have also been really good in they promise you a role at the end. So they do all of this training, and my law degree and my SQE is all funded, but then at the end I'm guaranteed a role within the team that I've worked in, which in my eyes was a great opportunity, and it would be ridiculous for me to have turned that down. And it's allowed me to have, as Will mentioned earlier, a really good work-life balance, because I get Mondays as kind of like my study leave day, and that's the day that I can do all of my uni stuff. And then obviously in exam periods it's a bit more intense, and you do your evenings and your weekends like any other student would, but the SQE obviously does build into the fact that you need time for your study, and that's completely accounted for. I get study leave, I get time off for exams, and I guess that was the main thing for me with the SQE, was just this worry of coming out and doing a law degree and not being able to find a training contract and then it being wasted. Whereas that's never been a problem for me, because I've always had the stability, and particularly working in a FTSE 100 company like Severn Trent, I've always had that job stability all through COVID. Everyone's always going to need water. So I've never had to worry about, losing my job and not being able to stay here. And that's been a massive relief for me, because a lot of people in my same cohort that I was at sixth form with have really struggled with worrying about being out of work or uni then going online. Whereas for me, since the beginning, university lectures have always been online. I've never actually been onto campus. So COVID was just kind of business as usual for me. Nothing really changed. And I think having that stability and has been really, really helpful for me, because I was only 18 when I started here at Severn Trent. So those I feel are the years where you need that stability, and knowing that you've got a company there that's rooting for you and that is looking out for you, and you've got that guaranteed qualification at the end.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. And I don't have a question, but we've had a comment from Nicola. Impressive answer from Tegan. Young people are so much more savvy now, and we need to respond to that. And absolutely, I agree.
Thank you,
Nicola, for that comment. I want to just go back to Will now. We'll come back to you again, Tegan. I just want to come back to Will and just talk about sort of the QWE, and there are some questions on that, and there's some questions for you as well. One of the intended benefits of the SQE is to allow aspiring lawyers to qualify by completing 2 years of qualifying work experience, which replaces the requirement to undertake a formal training contract. Can you tell us a bit about what constitutes qualifying work experience and what the employer's responsibility is to confirm it?
Sure. So again, I'll start from the basics, and then if there are any questions, and I'm also interested to listen to other perspectives as well. So this qualifying work experience is experience in providing legal services. It can be paid or voluntary. It has to expose the trainee to at least 2 competencies under the SRA's statement of solicitor competence. So it's relatively easy to meet that threshold. The 2 years, as I said earlier, can be completed in up to 4 organisations. I think someone has asked whether there's a minimum duration for a stint within an organisation. My understanding is that there isn't. However, you do have to bear in mind that maximum of 4 organisations. So obviously, if you're spending 2 weeks within a business, you might struggle to get there. Also, with my flex trainee hat on, we're quite mindful of the time it takes for someone both to start to add value to the law firm or business that they're in, but also to get that learning experience in. I think, and interested in Tegan's thoughts on this, but I expect you need to be immersed in the environment to a degree in order to really start learning. And Chrissy touched earlier on confirmation. So confirmation has to be done by a solicitor registered in England and Wales. They don't have to have a current practicing certificate. They actually don't even have to be the direct supervisor or even work at the organisation. Where that's the case, though, they must have reviewed their work during the period of work experience, and they have to have received feedback from whoever was supervising that work. So that's the sort of slight nuance there. And what you're confirming is 3 things. One is the length of the work experience. The second is that the work experience was providing legal services, and that the trainee had an opportunity to develop some or all of the solicitor competencies, so a minimum of 2, remember, and that there are no issues around character and suitability that arose during that period either. And I note that somebody has asked whether there is an SRA template for doing all of this. One of the things we've done here at Flex, because I think there is a need for that, is to develop our QWE journal, where we're looking to make it very easy and efficient when it comes both to trainees recording what they've been up to, but also supervisors confirming that work has been done. We offer that as part of our Flex trainee scheme, but actually we offer it to anybody for free who's working through the SQE, because we really want to make this as easy as possible. What the tool does is allow candidates to track all their experience, to learn and grow through reflective journaling. So we actually ask trainees to go above and beyond what the SRA requires and reflect on what they've learned through each element of work experience. And the tool then allows us to manage all of the supervisors and confirming solicitors in one place, so everybody has access to all the information that they need to do. And because it lays out all of the competencies, candidates, trainees can see where they might have gaps in experience. And so they might want to have a conversation with the supervisor around, realistically, you know, how can I develop myself in a given area if I'm not currently getting there. And it also allows them to track time worked on each placement, so they know that they're getting to their goal of 2 years experience. And I guess the final piece is that as part of the Flex trainee scheme, we use aggregated data from that tool to talk to businesses and law firms as well about which competencies are being very overexposed and which might be underexposed through the trainees and paralegals that we're working with, and then trying to find out how businesses that are really encouraging exposure to those underdeveloped competencies are doing that, so that we can share best practice and all of us learn together as a sort of community of employers through the SQE.
That brings me really nicely, actually, to a question that I want to ask you. The question that's come in is, do you know how generally the smaller or medium firms are reacting to the SQE?
Yeah, I think Hannah covered a little of it earlier. I think that, assuming that those are firms that are less likely to have huge armies of people and infrastructure to help manage this, it can be a bit daunting. So I think we're having a number of interesting conversations with smaller firms around how we can support them through some of the admin and the burden, the headache around administering the SQE. But I also think, and this touches, I think, on another question someone had, that this is a key area of competitive advantage for talent, potentially. And I think, Hannah, you touched on this as well. You know, if we really want to build out diversity and perhaps punch above our weight as a smaller or medium firm when it comes to winning work, and be able to tell a story to prospective clients that's real and substantive about the investments we're making, then this is a really attractive way of telling that story. And that's something that, I think is driving smaller or medium firms to think about ways in which they can streamline their processes around this. But Hannah would have a much better view of that than me, I think.
Happy for me to jump in?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
I just
anything that you'd like to say to that?
Yeah, I think so. So the question was on small to medium firms, wasn't it? And I think I agree with what you were saying. Well, I think it's just my understanding from where we're at right now is that the smaller firms have waited a little bit to see what's happening, and I don't necessarily think that many decisions have been made, but I think there are a lot of really good opportunities, as Will said, around getting a competitive advantage also, but things like the SQE graduate apprenticeship are a really, really good opportunity for smaller businesses to qualify individuals, have funding to qualify individuals, but not pay what was £12,000 for the LPC. it does give opportunities, and you know, and it gives more flexibility. I think with the with QWE, quite often, what, you know, in my previous firm, it was difficult to give a lot of the rotations. So to be able to give really, really good structured rotations around the business, it was quite tough because you've got less people, less teams to be able to do that. But with the QWE changing, it means that you're able to really just target it around your areas of business, and that you don't have to be rotating everyone. You can just be people, paralegals in the firm who are doing a great job, get them to qualify within that team, within the team they're already in, and invest in them that way.
Okay, brilliant. And there is a question that's come in for you in the chat, but I do want to just go to Tegan first. Tegan, can you tell us a little bit about the structure of your apprenticeship programme? It would be good to know about sort of the type of work that you do, and if there's a rotation for you as well, and how do you split your time between studying and work?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're actually a really small team. There's only 10 of us in the Severn Trent in-house legal team. So I think that that's one thing that puts particularly in-house firms off, is because they're a lot smaller. It's will we be able to support an apprentice? And you absolutely can. And one of the great things that Severn Trent have actually done is they're integrating a 6-month secondment within my apprenticeship. So in February next year, I'll go to a private practice firm, because one of the things I had flagged to my supervisor when I first started was that being in-house is great and I really enjoy it, but I'll never really get that experience of private practice and what that's like, and being able to time record and draft court documents and stuff that we don't do here. And my worry was that, you know, I could leave in-house and go to private practice at the end of my apprenticeship and I may not enjoy it because I've never really had that experience. So they agreed to build this in. So one of our partner firms, DWF, will be having me for a litigation seat for 6 months. So I think that's something really positive and something in-house firms could do if they are worried that they can't cover everything that you might need to reach those specific things within the SRA's guidance. I guess in terms of my seat, so I started in environmental regulatory, and that was the seat really that eased me in and allowed me to progress the most. So that was looking at prosecutions, drafting witness statements. So that was really, really interesting. And I did that for about 2 years. So I've now moved into my second seat. And I do customer and developer services. So it's really looking at queries that come from within the business, and it's quite heavily focused on business partnering. And I think that's another great thing that in-house allows you to do, is almost the commercial awareness side of things and understanding, right, okay, yeah, you've got the legal knowledge, you've been online, you've looked up this particular query, but how then do you switch that and turn that into something that people in the business that have no legal background can understand? And that was something that I really struggled with at first, because I'd done law at A level, and of course I'm doing it at uni now, and everything is really kind of black and white. But then actually when you need to then apply that to a particular scenario and revert back to the business and tell them why they can't do something that they want to do, or why they can't do a project in a particular way, that was something that actually took a lot of getting used to and that I'm still learning to navigate now. So my next seat after this will be my secondment, and then when I come back I'll be looking at commercial, and there's also scope for me to do real estate and contracts. So even though we are a small team and we tend to just have one solicitor that looks after each area, I still get that kind of rounded experience in all of those different seats. So I don't think you need to be part of a particularly large law firm. And I actually find being part of a smaller team means that I get a lot more support, because there's more people there to kind of ask me about things. You spend a lot of time one-to-one with people when you're changing seats, so you've got that guidance, you've got that help. But then I also have like regular one-to-ones with people in my team, and I also have a set supervisor that we check in every 2 weeks, and I also have a skills coach from the university that meets with me and my supervisor every so often, and we talk through, you know, how are you getting on, are you meeting the competencies, are you putting things aside to build towards your portfolio for your SQE. So that's always really helpful as well, because you've kind of got that constant check-in, and also a relationship between the university and my life here at Severn Trent. So I think that's everything you asked, wasn't it? I don't think there was any.
That's a really great answer, and I'm glad that you're having such a great experience. And I think what it demonstrates is that just because a firm is small or the team is small doesn't mean that we can't put in creative or innovative solutions so that people can have that experience that they need, you know. And that brings me actually to this question. It's a great question from Helen, and I'll leave it to, I don't know who will want to take this question, but
yeah, I saw that and I thought, yes.
Have you seen it? You know, how are firms running? No, it's not that one. It's the how are firms dealing with the perception that a newly qualified who's gone through that SQE route and has done or want to do all that QWE and one team discipline, how are they going to be perceived to people that have gone through that traditional training contract? And that's an issue, isn't it? And I hear it all the time in our firm as well. Hannah?
Yeah, I think so. One of the probably the biggest challenges in my view of the SQE is that actually, whilst one of the opportunities is that it is removing the bottleneck for training contracts, one of the biggest challenges is that that bottleneck is going to move to NQ level. And you know, there are only so many NQ roles. There's not an unlimited number of NQ roles. So what that will inevitably cause is a lot of competition for those NQ roles. And how do people make sure that their work experience is standing out? Because, you know, everyone will have passed the SQE exams. What's going to set people apart from each other is that qualifying work experience. I think there is a question on what do we mean by valuable experience? For us, this is part of why we wanted to respond to the SQE really early, because actually we saw you know, individuals can just qualify themselves through the SQE. They can, you could have someone working as a legal assistant in your business who wants to self-fund their SQE1 and SQE2 exams and claim that their, you know, their legal assistant work meets the requirements of the SRA's qualifying work experience. And then they qualify and they say, great, I've done 2 years in family, I want to be a family solicitor now. And actually that creates challenges because you've got, they're going to be going up against other people who've been doing trainee level work, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's why we wanted to get on top of it earlier, so we could raise awareness with individuals in the business of, well, hang on a minute, take a step back. You can qualify yourself through the SQE, but if you're going to be qualifying yourself and you're going to be basing your QWE experience purely on the one team, the one area that you've been working in, is that still going to give you a competitive edge when you hit NQ level? So it's about getting people to just think about that long-term goal before they move forward. And actually, you know, what do they want their QWE to look like? Because actually they only get to be at this level once they're qualified. The expectation is they will be at solicitor level. So actually don't necessarily run through your QWE just to get it signed off. What is the value that you're going to be getting? You know, make sure you're getting really good experience, make sure you're getting a variety if you want to. But in terms of us in the business, as the business, where we are able to control QWE is through our training contract route and our apprenticeship route. And the apprenticeship route, yes, it is predominantly in one team, but we question what valuable looks like. And actually in that one team, actually it's really valuable for that person to just spend the whole duration of time in that one team, because they're not getting as broad experience, but they're getting a really in-depth focused experience in that team. And they are still getting some variety, because that's why we've built in that one additional rotation, so that they are getting some variety in there as long as it complements the area. So I think it's around questioning what valuable means, and around questioning what does the NQ look like at the end of it? What do you need from your NQ solicitors? I hope that's answered the question.
I don't know if you've seen, I've got one more question there. How are you segueing away from or transitioning the SQE alongside your existing trainee program? Because there's going to be that sort of messy transition period, isn't there? And I think that's one of the biggest challenges for law firms. It's you're okay now and you're going to be okay after. But what does that sticky middle bit look like?
Yeah, I think for us, it's actually just embracing the messy. And I think, it is going to be messy. And, we live in a VUCA world, don't we? We live in a volatile, uncertain, complex and abstract world. It is what it is. And we are just embracing that messy, and we're using it to create choice and flexibility. So with our training contract route, our trainees who start, so we recruit our trainees mostly 2 years in advance. So our trainees that we're recruiting this summer will start in 2024. Our preference, and we're being very open with people, our preference is that they do the SQE route. However, if they have already done their LPC, if they're already studying towards that route, we can run them both alongside each other. We are front loading. So with the SQE, your SQE1 and SQE2, there is this question of, do you do your SQE1 and SQE2 while you're working, or do you front load these programs? We're choosing to front load all of our programs. So what that means is that where some people might be doing their LPC, we are front loading, and the people who are doing the SQE are doing their SQE1 and SQE2 prep courses during that period of time before they start their training contract, like you would an LPC.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make clear, you said that Shakespeare's were funding the prep courses, but not the exam. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah, we're funding the exams. Yeah, we're funding the exams.
Are you funding the exams as well?
Yeah, funding exams and prep courses. Yeah.
Super. Will, I don't know if you could answer this one. How does the SQE work with the GDL? Is SQE1 repeating part of the GDL?
I don't know, actually, Hannah, if you might have a view on that, because I'm not entirely sure.
Chrissy might know the answer to this one.
Yeah, I'm also looking at Sarah Ramsey on the call.
This is a tricky one.
I think so. We're having whole conversations around this, and I think I don't think it's just us. The conversations that we're having with other law firms also is that everyone's kind of on the same view as us, of it is a massive gamble to remove the GDL. And if you are someone who's been working in law for many, many years, has actually built a really good understanding of black letter law throughout your studies or throughout your work, you might not need to do the PGDL. But do we want to take that gamble right now? No. So right now we want people to do the PGDL who are non-law students. Also because we just think, if you've done a chemistry degree and then to sit what is essentially SQE1 with potentially no legal work experience, which is, that the SQE exams are testing your ability to work as a solicitor. That's quite a big step to take without any legal background. So we are still requiring the PGDL, but to the point of it is a really messy time at the moment. We're going to keep our eyes on it and see how things go. If things progress further and actually there is less of a need for the PGDL in the future, then yeah. But actually there are from what we found, there are some elements of the GDL that are covered in the SQE, but actually it is that foundation of learning that we want them to have that before they even run down the SQE route. Brilliant,
thank you. Will, if I may come to you, just because I know that we've had a couple of questions on this already, the apprenticeship scheme, it's something that more and more employers are taking advantage of since the SQE came into force. Can you explain how businesses apply for the apprenticeship levy and if there are any eligibility criteria?
Sure. So just before I dive into that, I just wanted to add a little bit to Hannah's comments around the value of the SQE versus a traditional training contract, because it did sort of strike me. Sometimes I pick up on a bit of nervousness around this. And, I remember some of the horror stories from my friends doing traditional training contracts, spending months paginating or filing and wondering what the value of that learning is, to Hannah's point about value. And really it is about a successful career outcome. that we're driving towards. On the Flex Trainee program, we actually have an induction program that all of our trainees have to go through before they start work, aiming to really arm them to get the most of the experience. And it's that continual mentoring and training we're finding that leads to an individual emerging at the end of that process, being able to be highly competitive in the job market, and to get through that NQ bottleneck. So I think that, you know, Hannah raised it as a key challenge. I think it's absolutely right, but it's something that can be addressed thoughtfully. But on the apprenticeship levy, so it's not something businesses apply for, and there aren't eligibility criteria as such. The apprenticeship levy was launched in 2017. All employers with a wage bill that's above £3 million have to pay 0.5% on top of that wage bill to HMRC as a levy tax. They can then reinvest that levy back into their workforce in the form of apprenticeship training. So in the context of the SQE, they can use this then to fund solicitor apprenticeships. So that's paying for the SQE prep courses and exams. The solicitor apprenticeship is a 6-year program, as Tegan was pointing out earlier. If you're a graduate, you can apply for an exemption for part of that. I guess a few other practical things to note. So under the solicitor's apprenticeship scheme, if that's how you want to go, the training and the assessment has to be delivered by a provider that's approved by the Register of Apprenticeship Training Providers, so that you need to check that. The levy can't be spent on anything outside of the training and the courses. So your apprentice's salary, admin costs, any training that's not related to the apprenticeship, travel expenses, all of that stuff, you can't draw down from the levy. Any company can create an apprenticeship program and then use their levy funds, and you access those funds through an online apprenticeship services account. So that's the sort of mechanics of it. And then I think this has been covered already, but just for completeness, any businesses or firms that aren't large enough, or don't have a big enough fund to cover their training, there are other options. So one is, I think has been mentioned already, the government will pay 95% of training costs. So actually you only need to pay 5% if you don't have a big enough levy to cover your training costs. The second is that other companies who might be might have too much in their fund that they can't spend through their training costs, they can actually gift up to 25% of their funds to another business. So there are some conditions around that, but I guess that's an acknowledgement of the fact that some businesses will have a huge levy and hardly any apprentices, and then some will have the reverse. Companies can actually help each other out in that way. I hope that's a helpful overview, but that's where things stand.
No, that's really helpful. Thank you, Will. And I know that there are a couple of people that asked that question, including Liz. So hopefully that's been useful. Super, thumbs up. Okay. Right. It's 12:51. Goodness. So just I want to come to Tegan quickly, if I may. From your sort of apprentice lens, it would be really good to know what particular aspects of the recruitment process, training or management or culture at Severn Trent that have really stood out to you in a positive way. What have they done that was just a really good experience for you?
So I would say actually the recruitment process here was actually really good. So I was 18 when I was going through the recruitment process, and I'd never really done anything like it before. I'd applied for, part-time jobs and things like that, but I'd never really been through a proper recruitment process where we had to go to like an assessment centre and all that sort of thing. But what Severn Trent had been really good was they'd allocated someone in HR to me who I could ring if I had any questions. They would call and check in with me the day before I got an assessment centre, or ask me how I'm getting on. They'd also give me guidance and tell me the sorts of things that they were looking for. So it didn't feel like a test. It felt like everybody that was part of the recruitment process wanted you to do your best. And I think that that's the thing that is so scary, particularly at such a young age, is you feel that you're being judged and everything that you're doing is everybody's watching you. when actually people were just trying to bring the best out of all of us. And I think that was a really positive thing, that there were no surprises on the assessment centre day. We were given a breakdown of everything that we would be tested on, everything that would be asked. We were allowed to pre-prepare things and have notes in there with us, which really, really helped and kind of took away the stress and the worry of the recruitment process. And since I've been here, so I have like several mentors that are scattered in different parts of the business and that have done very different things. So I think that's really helpful for kind of professional development. I get to go on all of the same training courses as people in the team. So I'm trained on things that are kind of outside of the scope of the SQE, things like GDPR. I have quite a big role in that, which has been really helpful because it broadens my knowledge to things that aren't even really law related. And then I also have a network of other apprentices in and out Severn Trent. So I was kind of paired with other apprentices in Severn Trent because we have people in the operational side of the business, but also in things like finance and HR. So that's been really good, because my kind of only worry with doing the SQE was that you don't really get that university experience. So, you know, you don't get to go and live in halls and be around people and go onto campus, which for me, I wasn't really bothered because this works out better for me anyway. But I think for some people that was quite a big challenge of the SQE. So Severn Trent clocked onto that quite early and made sure that I had an apprentice network. So every so often, you know, we all go out and have a drink or we do stuff together, which I think has been really nice, and it's given me that side of things as well.
Lovely. Thank you so much for such a complete answer, Tegan. I'm glad that you've had such a great experience at Severn Trent.
Thank you.
That's many of the questions answered that we had. I want to hand over to Chrissy now, just to sort of ask any further final questions to our panelists and to wrap up. I don't know where the hour's gone.
Thank you. And that's been a really, really interesting session. Loads of really good information out there. I know there's still a few questions in the chat that haven't been answered, and there's a couple which I think are quite interesting. One of them is, would you recommend a student opts for the SQE without a legal position in place, or would it be better for students to look for a paralegal position and then consider the SQE? This is quite an interesting question that I've thought about a few times, because under the traditional route, it was nearly always necessary, and you might have, I'm sure you've got opinions on this, Will, to do the LPC before you could secure a paralegal position. And under the new route, I don't know how we're seeing employers react to that, whether they're asking for students to have completed the SQE1 before they start, or are they happy for them to come straight in from having done a law degree without any experience, or is it varied? In which case that obviously depends, you know, you might not have the choice. If a lot of employers are looking for SQE1, you might not have the choice to start doing your paralegaling before doing the SQE1. I'll ask Will that first.
Sure. So I think the question, what are people looking for in terms of paralegals? I think it depends on the nature of the work that the paralegals are going to be doing. So if that work is a little bit more up the value chain, then very often they will ask for an LPC, rarely ask for SQE1, although that's more an omission rather than not counting that, if that makes sense. It just might not be aware to ask for that, but that's still the case. So you're right, there will be paralegals who potentially don't have a choice. I think addressing it from a slightly different angle, you know, the sort of the risk of embarking on SQE without having, I guess, you know, guarantee of a newly qualified role at the end of the process, I think is in some ways a trade-off for the flexibility and the reward that the SQE gives, but also is something that needs to be thought through. One of the things we're doing with the Flex Trainee program is having businesses commit to a minimum 12 months with us, but they can extend that, and if they do take trainees through the 2-year program, they can transfer that trainee onto their payroll from ours at no cost, because we've both invested a lot in that individual. And I think a similar sort of thinking ahead, and even if it's not within the Flex Trainee program, you know, understanding particularly in the in-house environment, it's hard to predict what capacity and workload is going to look like in the next 6 months, never mind the next 2 years. Finding a way to have a reasonably secure route to an interesting job opportunity upon qualification is important.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Will. Just another couple of quick questions. Another one from Liz saying, is the 2-year requirement for QWE linear in time, or can it be done over a longer period of time? I think I'm correct in saying that it can be done over a longer period of time. It just has to amount to 2 years in total. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, that's my understanding as well, but it's one of the things that I don't think is mega clear yet. Referring back to Hannah's world of dealing with the messy, I don't know if that's been explicitly sort of said, but that seems to be everyone's expectation. Yeah.
A couple more quickly. Is there a minimum time period between SQE1 and SQE2? As far as I understand it, you can do SQE1, which is the first sitting of SQE1, which would be sat in November, and you could do then the first sitting of SQE2, which would be in the spring, provided you've got your exam results back and can continue. So I think the minimum time period is the time period between the 2 sets of exams. So that's my understanding of that. Is that everyone else's understanding? Yes. And just one question that I was interested in as well. I've had a few students saying to me that who are retrospectively using their QWE, and their employers are denying to confirm their QWE. Are there circumstances where QWE can, where your employer can refuse to confirm it either retrospectively or prospectively, i.e. whilst you're doing it?
So looking at the SRA guidelines, employers should take reasonable steps to confirm QWE, but they do set out situations where it can be refused. And I think that's most likely to happen retrospectively. So it's if the supervisor's left and there's no one there to confirm that the work has been done. If they haven't kept, or the trainee hasn't kept any records, there isn't adequate evidence to allow a supervisor to reasonably confirm the accuracy of the experience. It's things like that, but there is an expectation that employers take reasonable steps to confirm QWE.
Hannah, did you want to jump in next? I can see you nodding. No, I was just going to say exactly the same thing. So I was going, yep.
That's good.
Okay, fine. I think that pretty much covers all the questions. I'm sorry if we haven't got to all of them. I'm happy to answer any questions separately if somebody wants to email me, or I'm sure we all are. So thank you very much for joining today. This has been a really, really interesting session, and everybody's been so engaged, which is really pleasing to see, because it is something which affects many, many businesses, and I still think a lot of them are unaware to what extent it affects them. So I really appreciate you all giving up your time today to clarify a lot of issues and fully demystify a lot of the SQE processes. So I will say thank you again, and I will let you go back to the rest of your days, and hopefully we'll see each other again soon.
Yeah, we'll make sure that we send out the recording to everyone that's attended today as well, in case you didn't catch all the answers in full, so you can go through the notes again. All right, thank you. Take care. See you.
Thank you, everyone. Good to meet you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.